Hi. Uh, this is the second in the prophecy series. This is speculative. This is not hard science. My general pitch is hard science, but other two ways to get traffic. One is you can have alarmism. That brings you some interest. The other thing that you can do is you can talk politics. I'm sorry, politics is, they are so angry on both sides that I can't function in those waters. But alarm, yeah, I'm gonna be kind of acting like an alarmist. And today the alarm concerns the um, weather. Um, You want to see the sources on this, go in your browser, go to nobabies.net, and if you go there, you'll get something that looks like this. Some pictures, because I was told you had to have pictures on the first page of your website, or otherwise people wouldn't come. They weren't coming. I did it. They still don't come. If you need to get a hold of me, just follow right on down to here where it gives an email address. You can email me. I check it rarely. Then papers I've written, summaries, source code for computer program, YouTube links where you can get a copy of this sometime, and these YouTube video scripts. So if I say something and you don't quite pick up on what the reference was, you can go there. Not going to have much references today. That's for the um, really hardcore science. The stuff that's really scary. And is not speculative at all. This stuff is okay. So first 32 of those. Maybe you want to look at some more. Um, so today the subject is Gog Magog. A nice word. Uh, when I was a kid, we thought of Gog and Magog as frost giants, supernatural creatures, Ultima Thule, the far north. They're only defeated at the end of time. But Magog's not such an unusual name in Scripture. Here's somebody named Magog in Genesis. Here's someplace else in Genesis, another person named Magog in Ezekiel, which oh, Son of man, set thy face against Gog. Okay, right. Something is obviously an enemy. Thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. All right, fine. Gog's there just an enemy. And it shall come to pass that I will give unto Gog a place there of graves in Israel, the bury Gog and his multitude. The travelers will see the bones of Gog before they're properly buried, of course. All right, it's just an enemy of enormous numbers. Um, Gog comes back, and Magog in Revelation, and shall go out and deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as great as the sand of the sea. This is Revelation. Obviously, this satanic creature is not going to do awfully well. And they're called Gog and Magog, and the numbers, the sand of the sea. Doesn't seem to be anything supernatural about them except that they deceive the nations. Only remarkable thing is they have really big armies. I'd be happy to say they represent some sort of ice event kept alive in tradition from distant past. I can't convince myself of that. As for the great numbers, if they live in the far north, Much of the year, travel's difficult. People hunker down, so they marry kin um, and have a lot of babies. So that used to be the case. In the north, they had the babies, and now they've got tight little cars and good, safe roads, and they travel around a lot, and the demographic situation is reversed, so the north is dying out. Well, there were what you could call frost giants, but there's some. Um, they're in Norse legends. They're not really scriptural. I was in Sweden once out with a few friends trying to fly a kite. They told me my kite would not work in the wonderful wind we had, blustery winter day. And I said, but it says here that this is for strong winds. Well, the kite exploded. And while we're out there in the countryside, every now and then you get this howling, and you see the woods in the middle distance bending down like something had dropped on them, making a half-human sound. And sometimes they'd hit me, and you could make a case that you were being tormented by invisible giants. Okay, as I said, this is speculative. Don't try to pass in school by using this to answer any questions, at least so far. I'm a climate change enthusiast. Yeah, I think the climate changes seems to be well documented. Um, Not quite so sure that global warming is the real threat, um, but let's go after it. It's attributed to rising CO2 levels. Um, okay, some temperature rise does seem to be a fact. What to do about it seems obvious. We're entering levels of the CO2 levels so high we don't know what to expect. So simple prudence says cut down on your CO2. You don't know what this is. Mechanism why it might cause global warming, the CO2 I mean, is supposed to be the greenhouse effect. Light coming in like light entering a greenhouse. There's the heat's trapped because CO2 is opaque to infrared, and heat dissipates heat. Despite the popularity of the concept, there's some problems. One is that if CO2 causes global warming, one would expect that the greatest effect would be near the big industrial centers where they burn the most fuel and produce the most CO2. Instead, it's greatest around the Arctic. They have a name for it, Arctic amplification. In other words, we know, quote, quote, it's being caused by CO2 rise, so the fact that the Arctic is thawing faster than any place else just means that's where it means the theory doesn't work, okay? Another problem is, as far as I've ever heard, the computer model for how CO2 causes temperature rise is a one-dimensional model. I've yet to hear of a three-dimensional model. Difference is important. You have to understand the lapse rate. The higher you go in the atmosphere, the colder it gets. Imagine a glob of air, raise it, and pressure on it will fall, so it expands and that cools it, and lowered it gets compressed, warms. Given the freedom to move, a glob of air will seek its own density, warming or cooling as it goes up or down. This change is the lapse rate. Depends on classical gas laws, and it varies in nature to a degree. If you heat a region around and the air over it, the air will rise. The air contains a lot of moisture. The moisture will condense, releasing heat. This is the opposite of boiling, right? The released heat will make the warm, moist air rise faster and higher. You see this on many a summer day. Cumulus clouds or cumulonimbus clouds mean there's a thunderstorm. Since there are a lot of thunderstorms in the world at any one time, a lot of heat is being lifted high by convection, this, hot air rising, radiates itself into the coldest space. It's got to be the primary way that we get rid of the heat that comes in from the sun. Okay, if the air contains a lot of CO2, dry air is mostly nitrogen, molecular weight 28, CO2, molecular weight 44. Here's what they look like. All right, there's your nitrogen, two nitrogens hooked together. Here's a carbon hooked to two oxygens, molecular weight 44. Not twice this. All right, the nitrogen molecule has three obvious ways it can store energy. It goes in a direction, and that is translation, so to speak. It moves, and you've got, kinetic energy is 1/2 mass times velocity squared. It can spin this way, and that bond can stretch and come back together like a spring. Three ways to store heat. Carbon dioxide, well, yeah, you got your translation. It can move that way. It can spin this way, or that way, or that way. So, yeah, make up your mind. That's the three ways it can store heat by rotation. So that's 4 ways so far. Each of those bonds can store heat, and it's always the same amount of heat on average. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. Oh yeah, and that angle can change. Can do this on you. Each of those mechanisms will absorb or release energy until, on average, it matches all the others. There's 7 ways to store heat there, 3 there. Yeah, it's heavier, it's not twice as heavy. CO2 will carry more energy per molecule and even per pound than nitrogen. So put more CO2 in the atmosphere, and the CO2 rises and takes with it more than twice as much heat as an equal amount of nitrogen. All right, so that makes convection more effective at stripping heat out of the planet. That's what this is all about. So it's a heat dissipating fool. It blocks infrared, CO2 does. That's why, it's supposed to produce the greenhouse effect, which doesn't even work for greenhouses, by the way. They work by blocking convection. It blocks infrared. It can absorb infrared and release it. So basic physics means that CO2 way up there where convection is going to take it, and heat's going to take it, gets up there, it's more efficient at dumping the heat to the coldest space. If it freezes into dry ice at about 10 miles up, it's only a little bit, a couple miles past the point where the highest cumulonimbus clouds stop. They stop because they run out of moisture to condense. So way up there, by about 10 miles, I reckon, they probably people who know better than I am, they're awfully reticent about putting good facts onto the internet. Okay, so goes up there, releases more heat as it drops out as carbon dioxide snow, and that releases more heat and it continues up. So let us agree that it's reasonable to suspect that at least part of the effect of CO2 is global cooling. Okay. There's the planet Venus. Surface is extremely hot. Couldn't survive there. We hear things like runaway greenhouse effect. Well, there's no greenhouse effect in Venus because the sunlight doesn't get to the surface. It can't get in and get trapped. Sunlight and the coldest space equilibrate at the visible surface, which is the top of the atmosphere, which is what you see in beautiful, pure white, lovely planet. That's all sulfuric acid. Um, and that's where it equilibrates with sun and space, and it's uh, warmer than the Earth would be at that distance from the sun, but not that much warmer. Nothing like it is now. Okay, so um, the surface is hotter than the top of the atmosphere because of our good old friend, the lapse rate. People are seriously suggesting putting stuff like sulfuric acid into the atmosphere to combat global warming. To me, that is insane. Okay, this is speculative. I think they're crazy. You just make the Earth more like sweltering Venus. A lot of us think contrails are already having the same effect. So if you're a climate warrior, you pull a bead on contrails. Yeah, maybe CO2 matters. I wish we weren't releasing so much. I'm with you, but that's not, I think, the big one thing. Okay, big volcanic eruption, dust, carbon dioxide released, and then it gets cold. And on balance, um, whatever cooling is done by CO2 or lack thereof. Oops, need to shut this down. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Can you shut that down? Stop now. This whole discussion has been so, no, if I were in the zoo, I'd try to put a drone through the plume of a volcano and see just how much CO2 it is putting out, at what speeds and volumes and so forth. I think that would be important. The whole thing's gotten so silly in the past that every summer we'd get warnings of global warming from burning so much stuff in fires. And every winter we'd get warnings about nuclear winter because a nuclear war would burn up so much stuff. It was really most bizarre. And basically, for a while, nuclear war became less likely, so the global warming club has thrived. So the two sides now call each other liars or deniers, depending on which side. Seems to me the Arctic ice cap is shrinking. Now get careful. It's copyrighted material I'm about to give you. I'm not monetized. It doesn't make a cent. This is education. Only feel free to use anything I do. Okay, here's a record of recent ice cover in the Arctic Ocean, and as you can see, up until the past few days, the ice cover was way below anything it had ever been. It has now crossed that line, which, yeah, that's right. We're losing Arctic ice. And if you look at the concentration here, that is about 50% of the surface is actually ice. All right, so the only places where it's ice with no water showing through, there's places where it's completely white. Everything else is broken ice, particularly here. Okay, from North Pole top of Greenland's about 500 miles. So once you get a ring of open water around the North Pole, maybe 100 miles in radius, things begin to happen. And it's not even the solstice yet. It's, as I'm doing this, it's not the 21st of November yet, June. But yeah, brave man to say it will not get that much further in the next 3 months. Okay. And at that point, we get the North Pole absorbs the most heat, is potentially the hottest place in the world, and so huge updraft. Trying to calculate if a thunderstorm has typical radius of 100 miles, it'd be 30,000 square miles, or there should be a 267 areas that size on the world on one side. That seems a little lower than I would have guessed, but there you go. The whole world is being warmed. The hottest place is the North Pole, where the air is going up, and that pulls air from all over. And if you take the fourth root of 267, yeah, pretty close to 5. So with the 1 to 5 inch hailstones we now get would go to 5 to foot to 2 foot hailstones. When that puppy begins to drop hail, you don't want to be in the way, either outside or inside or in your car. Okay, even if it's gone up, dumped a lot of energy into coldest space, it still wants, that air wants to go to where it's coldest. This is an inner urge. That's what energy means. So so it wants to go to the South Pole. Maybe it'll spread out beautifully like an umbrella over the surface of the earth. More likely it'll break through as a single corridor. Here's the jet stream now. You can see it is not very orderly. Goes from Arctic to tropic, northern hemisphere. This is going to be tropic. It goes from Antarctic to tropic in the southern hemisphere. It's already almost ready to reach from pole to pole. But I don't know why the south of the equator is more chaotic than in the north. That may be just that day's finding. And if we go on down here, here was a few days later. This is a prediction. You can see it's running right down the coast of California. Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego. All those great cities on the west coast could be buried under a blanket of hailstones, like a couple miles deep. Hailstones the size of typewriters. You don't know what a typewriter is now. Yeah. May have happened before. As a child, they used to talk about mammoths with unwilted flowers in their stomachs. I saw that debunked and thought, oh no, the flowers don't get digested into the lower GI tract of the mammoth. You're right, they said unwilted, meaning minutes to hours. You went from a mammoth eating flowers in a beautiful meadow to frozen all the way through, so that the flowers froze in its gut. That was cold. There used to be something called the Grasshopper Glacier. I think it's pretty much gone now. My father's young man said you could ride on horseback out there, and the whole glacier from top to top had grasshoppers mixed in with it. Well, grasshoppers can do wonderful things. Jumping around on ice is not their strength. So, yeah, the whole grasshopper glacier was laid out in a single afternoon. Um, all right, if I ran the zoo, I'd go around to the glaciers and inspect them either with polarized light, or I'd cut out slabs and x-ray them. I'd see if the ice inside some glaciers is actually made up of giant hailstones, not snow, which has been the party line as long as I've learned about it. Okay, talking about possibilities. I'm no expert. Don't take this as truth, just something to think about. Um, if you want to believe something, go to where I pointed out first 32, what do they call it, scripts, movie scripts. And there's some things here I'd like to get some answers on, but I don't see that happening. Okay, thank you. See you in on another day.